You all know about Moses from the Bible. You've heard stories about Moses. Well, Moses was a pretty important guy in our faith history. But Moses always carried around a staff, a big tall rod, and he used that staff for lots of things. But you're going to meet his staff today, and you're going to find out all about him and some of the things he did. So feel free, when our staff makes silly comments, to moan and groan, and listen to his story, because he has a lot to tell you about Moses with the help of the handbells.
What's wrong with you people? Haven't you ever seen a walking stick before? My name is Rodney, but you can call me Rod. That's what Moses called me. Yep, I said Moses, the great man himself. We worked together for a long time. You might say I was his staff. I think the most important thing I ever learned from Moses was about obeying rules. I know humans don't like to think much about rules. Why, ever since your really great grandparents, Adam and Eve, had problems with that snake. You've had a hard time keeping rules. Well, if it makes you feel any better, Moses had trouble too. You see, Moses grew up as an Egyptian prince. But one day, he made a foolish choice and broke a big-time Egyptian law. Uh-oh! Uh-oh is right. Moses was in so much trouble that he had to run away from Egypt into the desert. See what happened when Moses broke the rules? He used to be a prince, living in a fancy palace, eating all the candy bars he wanted. But now he was living in a tent with sand in his sandwiches and taking care of a bunch of smelly sheep. I'm sorry to have to say it, but sheep are just plain dumb. They'll go wandering off if you don't watch out. One day, Moses and I were up on Mount Sinai looking for this silly sheep named Petunia, when all of a sudden we came around a big rock and saw a bush on fire. It was very strange. The fire was blazing hot, but the bush didn't burn up at all. Then a voice spoke from the bush, and it was the voice of God.
Moses, take your shoes off, for you are standing on holy ground.
Moses took off his flip-flops real fast. He was hanging on to me and shaking so badly that I got dizzy. God spoke again to him and told Moses to go back to Egypt and bring all his Hebrew family and friends to Mount Sinai to go to church. Well, this news really stressed Moses out. It made me nervous too. Whenever Moses was under a lot of pressure, he liked to whittle. Honestly, if God talked to you out of a burning bush, wouldn't you just say, "Yes, sir," and do what he told you? No, not Moses. Oh no, he had to make all these excuses why he couldn't obey God. And that's when it happened. "Moses, what's that in your hand?" And Moses answered, "My staff." And God said,
Throw it down.
Boom! I hit the ground and all my insides turned to jello. My body was twisting and turning, and I had this slippery tongue that went two ways at once. I was a snake! Ugh. I looked up for Moses, but he was running the other way. I tried to catch up to him, but he wouldn't let me get near him. Finally, God said,
Pick the snake up by the tail.
how embarrassing. The next thing I knew, I was a walking stick again. Then God commanded Moses to tell the Egyptian king Pharaoh to let the Hebrew people leave. And if Pharaoh wouldn't let them go, then Moses was to do the whole snake trick thing all over again. I got to thinking, why did I have to suffer when it was someone else breaking God's command? But that's the way it is. When you break God's rules, we hurt others as well as ourselves. What happened next is a long story, but I'll try and make it short. Moses went back to Egypt and told the Hebrew people to come with him to Mount Sinai for church. They said, "Okay," but Pharaoh said, "No way." And God said, "You'll pay." 10 times Pharaoh disobeyed, and each time God sent a plague. That's something really gross, like frogs all over the place, or grasshoppers in your orange juice. You don't want to make this. And I ended up doing the snake thing not once, but twice. Finally, Pharaoh said, "Okay," but all the Hebrew people followed Moses and me out of town, right up to the Red Sea. But that Pharaoh turned out to be as dumb as a sheep. He changed his mind and started chasing the Hebrews with his army. Then the coolest thing happened. God sent a strong wind and opened up a street right through the middle of that Red Sea. Yes, sir, we walked through on dry land. No one can call me a stick in the mud. Those foolish Egyptians followed us right into the sea, but they didn't make it. When the last Hebrews got through to the other side, the water came crashing down on Pharaoh and his army. After a good long hike, we reached Mount Sinai. All the people gathered around the bottom of the mountain to worship. Then Moses went up to talk to God, and God gave him some new rules for the people to follow. But it took a long time, so the Hebrew people started getting bored. They began to whisper and pass notes and on until they forgot all about God. They even made a golden statue shaped like a baby cow and bowed down to worship it. Well, God is kind of like your mom. He knows what you're doing, So he sent Moses back down with the new rules written on stone tablets. But when Moses saw all the rule breaking going on, he got so mad he threw the tablets down and they broke all to pieces. In fact, you could say Moses is the only person to ever break all 10 commandments at the same time. God was very angry with the Hebrew people, but Moses prayed and asked for God to forgive them for their sins, and he did. God doesn't like it when we break his rules, but he is always willing to forgive us if we're truly sorry. God took Moses back up the mountain and wrote down all the rules again. We call these rules the 10 Commandments, and here they are. 1. Don't worship anybody or anything but God. 2. Don't make any statues or idols to worship. 3. Don't use God's name in a bad way. 4. Sunday is a special day to worship God and rest. 5. Honor and obey your mom and dad. 6. Don't murder anyone. 7. Keep your marriage promises. 8. Don't steal. 9. Don't tell lies about anyone. 10. Don't wish you had something that belongs to someone else. God is perfect, and his commandments are perfect. He knows we aren't perfect, but if we ask him, he promises to help us keep his rules. My goodness, look at the time. I have to be going. I've got a luncheon appointment in the snake house at the zoo. I found out I have some cousins over there. Well, thanks for sticking around.